Jon McCray, who runs the What Do You Meme YouTube channel, was on Michaela Peterson's channel, and the topic of evolution came up. Jon is a very influential Christian YouTuber. Let's see what happened.
Whenever I heard
Right.
about Christians, especially like as a kid, I was like, oh, Christians, the people who don't believe in evolution. Like that's
Right.
what I
Yeah.
knew about Christians, the people who don't believe in
Yeah.
evolution. And so I've talked. So what's your opinion on this? Okay.
Yeah.
And then I'll tell you my opinion. You go first. What's your
Okay.
opinion on evolution?
Okay.
Yeah, we've got to stop being those people. It's not good for witness. So let's see what Jon says.
Okay. So here's my thinking. So and this is a complex thing, and I'm not too far into it because I don't see it as really a stumbling block for a lot of people today. A lot of the younger generations, they don't really care if evolution is true or not in order to believe in God. So that's why I spend a ton of time focusing on it.
Well, it's good that he doesn't see many young people hung up on this. That's great news. But the perceived science versus religion conflict often makes the top 5 and certainly the top 10 lists of why younger folks are not Christian and why they are leaving the church. So I think the issue may be more important than Jon recognizes.
But my thinking goes something like this. When I look at the Bible, you have 66 books, written over a span of 1,500 years, 3 different continents, that aspect. But all of the different books, you have to understand what the genre is, right? So when I look at like Psalms, I understand that's not a historical genre, you know what I mean? And when I look at the Gospels, I understand that it is ancient Roman bio, you know what I mean? So I can understand it through that lens. And so you want to understand each book of the Bible through its appropriate lens. So it's like the Proverbs are not like, okay, these are promises, because the Proverbs on promises is wisdom, it's Proverbs, you know what I mean? And so understanding that now in most places in the Bible is pretty clear and pretty straightforward. But there's some places in the Bible where we're not exactly sure what it is for different reasons. And so when it comes to the book of Genesis, at least Genesis 1 to 12, it seems that there's something more going on than it just being this like historical narrative. It seems to be blending in just sort of like the stories of the culture at that time in the ancient Near East, blending in these stories for a theological purpose. That's the way I understand it, at least, is because it seems like from a theological purpose rather than just a strict historical purpose. That doesn't seem to make a lot of sense to me logically when I'm looking at it and then looking at the different accounts and that sort of thing. And then also reading all of the literature in the ancient Near East as well, too, that's available.
So far, so good. Spot on. I'm glad to see a young, influential YouTuber who gets this. And he went to the Bible first before he went to the science. I like that.
But I think, so when it comes to that, and so I think about through that lens, and then I look at the world, you know what I mean, and try to see what makes more sense. I can't see the world making sense to me for it to be 6,000 years old. That doesn't logically make sense to me, and it doesn't seem like it corresponds with reality. You can have ways around it, but we can talk about those later if needed. But then I think you have bigger problems. So if you say God created it and with the appearance of age, then I think you have bigger problems, because then how can you know anything at all, really? You know what I mean? Because the whole epistemic system is broken, and so that's a problem for me. But
Again, right on. Next, he'll get into some specific evidence.
I'd say that what I found to be the most persuasive, and again, I've only read a few books on this, but what I found to take as the most persuasive evidence for evolution would be like the pseudogenes. So, for example, whales have like these OR genes, they're oscillatory receptors. And so they're used for detecting violet chemicals outside of water, but these genes are dormant. And so you figure if God created the whale just as is, then why would he create it with these genes? You know what I mean? Because they're not being used.
This is still going well. The evidence he cites is great support for what he will call macroevolution. Whales evolved from land animals. That's a major transition. But then out of nowhere, things start to go off track here.
So I think that's probably some of the bigger evidence, but I still think that there's so many gaps in the fossil record. So yeah, so it's really tough. I haven't come to any like strong conclusions on it, but I think that there's something like some sort of, well, everybody believes in evolution to some degree, like there's some sort of evolving process, but I don't tend to hold to the view. I don't think that you have these different kinds of animals. I hate using that term, but so these different kinds of animals turning into other kinds of animals.
Ah, this is going so well. So he acknowledges that he hasn't done a ton of study in this area, so we shouldn't be harsh on him. I'll simply point out that I think the fossil record is more complete than he may recognize. Also, he says he doesn't believe in one kind turning into another kind, but he recognizes whale evolution. So I think he could reflect on this more.
So like the distinction I make with like macro evolution, that doesn't seem as plausible to me, but there is some sort of thing going on where you have these creatures that are like that have clearly shown some sort of evolution from being land animals, water animals, so on. So there's clearly some sort of evolution going on. I just don't think that it's that one blanket term of like everything comes from a single common, can't remember the term they use for it, but just like one like an amoeba or something like that. Yeah. There you go. Common ancestor.
So I don't know what is going on here. Jon seems to accept some really significant evolution, but he is not ready to accept that evolution goes all the way back to the beginning. I think a lot of Christians are in that camp, but I think the science is actually pretty strong that evolution goes back all the way to the beginning. And we shouldn't be afraid to accept that. Besides, what is the alternative hypothesis? That God uses evolution to a massive degree, but picked a couple points to jump in and directly create? I'm not sure that makes sense. Anyway, this is a difficult issue, and Jon hasn't done a lot of work on it, and it is a sensitive issue for some of his audience. So I understand Jon being non-committal. I hope he finds time to explore the issue further.